Hello and welcome to the Diplomatic Dispatch, the podcast where we go beyond the headlines to understand the complex currents of international relations. I'm your host. Today, we're diving deep into one of the most fraught and misunderstood relations on the global stage, the one between the United States and the small but strategic Red Sea nation of Eritrea. It all starts, as so many things do these days, on social media. A recent exchange between Ravi Batra, who is an American lawyer, and Eritrea's outspoken United States ambassador, Sophia Tesfamariam, which perfectly captured the ongoing narrative warfare that defines this relationship. Batra suggested that the inaccurate version of history of Eritrea was hurting its ability to make friends. Now, Ambassador Tesfamariam's response wasn't just a simple denial. It was a full-throated rebuttal, a detailed historical takedown that placed the blame for the isolation of Eritrea squarely on the shoulders of the United States. This single conversation is a perfect microcosm of a much larger battle, the struggle over who gets to tell the story of Eritrea. So today, we're unpacking that narrative. We'll explore the historical grievances, the competing claims, and the deep-seated mistrust that is continuously shaping the relations between the United States of America and the state of Eritrea. To understand Eritrea's perspective, you have to rewind the clock, way back. Ambassador Tesfamariam is correct when she points out that the U.S. has had a hand in Eritrea's destiny long before it was even an independent country. The critical moment came after World War II. The great powers were deciding the fate of former Italian colonies, including Eritrea. The United States, driven by its Cold War strategy, played a key role. Washington wanted to secure access to the crucial military and intelligence facilities in Eritrea, most famously the Kagnew Station communications hub in the capital, Asmara. So, what did they do? The U.S. championed a plan to federate Eritrea with its much larger neighbor, Ethiopia. This decision almost completely ignored the loud calls from many Eritreans for their own self-determination and independence. The result was predictable and tragic. The United States-backed federation quickly devolved into a full annexation by Ethiopia. This sparked a brutal 30-year war for independence. For 3 decades, Eritrean liberation fronts fought against Ethiopian regimes that were, ironically, supported at different times by both the United States and its Cold War rival, the Soviet Union. Think about that. Being a pawn in a global chess match fought on your own soil. It's no wonder this history has baked a fierce sense of self-reliance and a deep, abiding skepticism of foreign powers into the Eritrean national psyche. Now, let's fast forward to the 21st century, because the grievances don't just live in the past. Ambassador Tesfamariam points directly to the UN sanctions imposed on Eritrea in 2009 and 2011. Officially, these sanctions were for the alleged support of Eritrea for armed groups in Somalia and a border dispute with Djibouti. But Eritrea has always maintained its innocence. And in 2018, their position was largely vindicated when a UN report found no conclusive evidence of that support, leading to the sanctions being lifted. From Eritrea's perspective, these sanctions were never about facts. They call it narrative engineering, a deliberate campaign heavily pushed by the U.S. and its allies to create a pretext to punish and isolate their country. And this ties directly into another major point of friction: human rights. The United Nations Human Rights Council has passed numerous resolutions and even appointed a special rapporteur to monitor the situation in Eritrea, citing reports of widespread and systematic violations. But the Eritrean government rejects these reports. They see them as biased, politically motivated, and just another part of that same engineered narrative. Ambassador Tesfamariam even gets specific, accusing certain diaspora groups and NGOs, funded by organizations like the United States-based National Endowment for Democracy, of collaborating in this effort. And to be clear, the National Endowment for Democracy's own public records do show funding for groups working on democracy and human rights in Eritrea. For the U.S., this is promoting democracy. For the Eritrean government, it's blatant interference in its internal affairs. Now, this is where it gets even more complex. The observer who started this whole exchange, Ravi Bharta, introduced a fascinating twist. He expressed hope that the Trump administration had been a potential God sent to recalibrate relations between the United States of America and Eritrea. This is interesting. The Trump administration wasn't exactly soft on Eritrea. It imposed visa sanctions and included the country in its travel ban. But some, like Bharta, saw an opportunity for a more pragmatic, interest-based relationship, a departure from previous U.S. foreign policy. Bharta even draws a parallel between what he calls the Russia hoax against Donald Trump and the narratives he sees being used against Eritrea. This signals an alignment with a political view that is deeply skeptical of what it considers the foreign policy establishment and mainstream media narratives. It's a viewpoint that finds common cause with Eritrea's own deep-seated distrust. So, what does this all mean? The exchange between Bharta and Ambassador Tesfamariam reveals a profound chasm, a deep divide in how the world is seen from Washington versus how it's seen from Asmara. Eritrea's leadership feels its history has been systematically distorted and its sovereignty constantly undermined, with the United States as the primary antagonist. Ambassador Tesfamariam's defiant tone makes one thing clear. Eritrea is committed to its independent path, and will not, in her words, surrender its right to define its own future. For any real progress to be made, for any meaningful dialogue to happen, this has to be the starting point. The text we've been analyzing concludes that there must be a willingness to engage with the historical grievances of Eritrea and its deeply held belief that it is a victim of narrative warfare. Yes, the international community has legitimate concerns, but as the ambassador herself suggests, the path forward may lie in honest dialogue and principled engagement, rather than what Eritrea perceives as politically motivated pressure. The recalibrated relationship that Ravi Bharta hopes for is possible, but it requires something that's often in short supply in geopolitics: a genuine effort to understand the other side's story, no matter how much it challenges your own. That's all the time we have for this episode of the Diplomatic Dispatch. Join us next time as we continue to unpack the narratives that shape our world. Thanks for listening.